Good morning, and we are live again. Same church time, same church channel. Welcome into Sunday school. Still doing Revealing Revelation by Amir Tsarfati. We are up to chapter 7 of his book, which is chapter 6 in the book of Revelation. Let's see here. Before I get too far into this, silence. There we go. That way only the twitchy folks get the vibration. Just the brightness of my screen here. All right, I think. All right, good enough. So, I don't want to let my slight bit of OCD take over and spend the next 10 minutes. I gotta get the perfect picture. All right, Continue to pray for my mother dealing with cancer. They've figured out a treatment they're gonna do, so hopefully they're able to do that and it works out. She's really on top of getting checked up on all this stuff, especially since already having it twice before. So stage 1's very small spot, and just continue to pray that they can treat it and it doesn't get any worse, and that'd be the end of it. Continue to pray for William's dad as he recovers. Continue to pray for the Kohler kids. My friend who passed away a few weeks back. They're adjusting to him not being here, and so keep praying for those guys. Of course, pray for the church, pray for this class, pray for me, please. Trying to figure some stuff out on exactly what I'm doing work-wise. But if you have any prayer requests, leave a message, direct message me, leave a comment on Facebook. I will this afternoon get everything uploaded to Rumble. I'm behind several weeks now. I got some computer work I got to do this afternoon anyway, so I'll be on the computer at home, so I'll be able to get everything uploaded to Rumble and get that caught up. I know my buddy Bill out there is missing that I'm not putting this on Rumble, since he listens to it while he's driving his truck. But all right, so chapter 7, the Lamb opens the seals. Now, last time we talked about John is in heaven. He's in the throne room of heaven. Sees all these different heavenly hosts, so to speak, all these different angelic beings, the 4 creatures, the multiple faces and eyeballs and all this other stuff, right? And of course, the Lamb enters into, at the end of chapter 5 there, the Lamb enters into the throne room. And of course, John is very, very upset because nobody's worthy to open the seals on this scroll that's in the hand of God, right? So then the Lamb comes in. The Lamb is the only one worthy to open the seals on the scroll. This is a legal document. The seals are, like I said last time, they're used typically in wills. So someone who dies, they're not allowed to open those seals until someone dies, right? Until that person for that will dies, right? So Christ had to die. The Lamb had to be sacrificed to complete everything for him to be worthy to open the seals on this document, on the scroll, right? So what are those seals? What does that mean? What are we talking about here? Well, the seals represent judgments. 7 seals, 7 judgments. And so we go from this praise and worship service to suddenly now judgments are being handed out, right? So there's a change in tone here. There's which John is upset because no one can open the seals, but then Christ comes in there, the Lamb comes in, and he's able to open the seals. So now John's excited again, but we're about to get on this roller coaster and go, oh crap. So Amir Tsarfati says this: there are 3 series of 7 judgments that we will encounter in chapter 6, chapters 8, 9, and 16, Book of Revelation. You have the first thing, which is what we're going to talk about today, the seal judgments. Then we'll have the trumpet judgments, and then we'll have the bowl judgments. Come on, Owen. And so that's going to, it's when, oh God, the worst is over. Nope, no, it's not. It's going to happen again, and it's going to get even worse each consecutive time. So there's no rest. I mean, that's one of the things for the people during this period of time on earth. There is no rest. If you don't choose to accept God and follow God's ways of doing things, when the judgments come, there's no rest for you. It's not like when you deal with a kid who screws up and you give them a spanking, and then the spanking's over and they get to rest and recover, and their butt stops hurting, and then they can go on about their business because they took their punishment, right? Not the case. You're going to go through these 7 seals, and then you're going to go into the trumpets, and then you're going to go into the bowl judgments, right? So it's going to get intense. But he also says they are all linked together as the 7th seal and the 7th trumpet each open the next series. During the tribulation, just when the world thinks that maybe the worst is over, the next series of judgments will come. So we're going to go through 6 of the seals. The 7th seal has its own issue, but that's what rolls into the next set of judgments, right? That's the tie-in, the lead-in to the next thing. So chapter 6 covers 6 of the 7 seals. The 7th seal coming up in chapter 8. Let's see here. Revelation chapter 6, verse 1. Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see," right? Everything's being revealed to John, so we can write it all down. Let's see here. And we typically hear about, we've seen it in comic books, we've seen it in movies. Notre Dame one year, the Catholic college one year during the 20s with their football team had the 4 Horsemen. They were like these 4 really great football players at that time. They called them the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So it's taken on almost like this mythical, something out of somebody's imagination. So a lot of people don't take the 4 Horsemen seriously. The first time I ever encountered it was in the X-Men comic book series, and which they later took that into the cartoon series. They did something similar in their movie Age of Apocalypse they did a few years ago. They didn't come out and say 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, but so it's around. It's been in literature, it's been in comics, it's been in movies. And a lot of people don't take it very seriously. And a lot of people think it's allegorical or something, that just, it's representative of something, but it just doesn't have that much meaning for some reason. I don't know. I tend to take the Bible literally. So when, even in Revelation, and this is one of those things, there's a lot of figurative language. You do have to understand when you're reading poetry, you do have to understand, because there's a lot of biblical poetry. The Psalms being probably the most popular. Some of the prophets had poetry. You get into Mary the Magnificat, right, where Mary is becoming poetic and singing about, being chosen to carry the Christ child. So there are some spots where poetry shows up, and there is figurative language. And the King James Version specifically embellishes in certain situations and adds more flowery language when it's not really necessary. But at the same time, it doesn't really take away from. I think they were trying to add to the emphasis of a particular scripture in certain cases. But then most of the Bible is prose. It's an actual written story, and a good portion of it's history, right? So you got to understand when you're reading this stuff. Now, when you're talking about prophetic things, obviously that's future tense, things that will happen after that prophet or that person writes that stuff down, or God says, hey, write this down, or an angel comes and tells them, Zechariah angel comes and says, hey, this is going on, or here, let me show you this so that you can relay this to the Israelites, right? Well, like the angel comes down and collects John to take him to heaven to give him the revelation of Armageddon, of the apocalypse, right? All those mean the same thing. It all means revelation. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ, as we have said. And so when, like I said, I take this stuff literally, until you get into stuff you just know for a fact is metaphor, like when they talk about the oaks of Mamre, and when they say this leader was like a mighty oak. Well, obviously, we don't have people that are like trees. So we know that's metaphor. But in this case, when you're looking at these things, there's specific meanings that go with some of this. And I think some words are over-translated, and I'll show you that here in a minute. I think certain parts of the Bible are over-translated. It should have been left in the original Greek or the original Hebrew so that we could learn the true meaning behind it. Things get lost in translation. And probably the most common place to show that is when you go back to when Christ is redeeming Peter after he had denied him 3 times that night and the rooster crowed. When Christ is redeeming him and he says, do you love me? And he asks him 3 times, do you love me? Well, if you go back in the Greek, those are 3 different words that for love, and there are 3 different meanings. And it intensifies with each question. Do you love me like a brother? Do you love me like a father? Do you love me like a friend? It's how deep is that love? What does that love cover, right? So some places I think are over-translated. Even at this, I don't care, pick up the English Standard Version, Holman Christian Standard, King James, 1611 King James. I don't know, pick one. The Aitken Study Bible that was commissioned by the United States Congress back in the 1700s. We over-translate, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. So let's see here. So I said, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse show up in the first 4 seals out of 7. And verse 2, we see the white horse, which is given a crown and a bow to conquer. So, again, one of those situations, given a crown. Well, there's different words for different types of crowns. There's different crowns within the Roman Empire, within the Greek language. There's a crown that the king wears. There's a crown of victory given to generals, and there's these other different crowns. Not to mention that there's 7 or 8 crowns that God gives us to take into heaven for us to give and worship to Him. But in this case, and don't get the white horse confused with, and then its rider with Christ coming on His white horse to end everything and be victorious over all that stuff. Don't get confused with that. This is not the same thing. And even with the over translation here, when you see where it says to conquer, that's not language and description used for Christ. I mean, Christ is going to defeat everybody in the end, and he's going to win, and he's going to be victorious. But he's also the king, so he's not going to get the victor's crown. Well, how do you know it's the victor's crown? Well, the Greek word, if you go to Bible Hub, get the app or go to the website and look up Revelation chapter 6, verse 2, and start clicking on the links for the word crown, you'll find out that the actual Greek word is Stephanos. And Stephanos means victor's crown. So who's going to be victorious in conquering stuff? Well, at this time, all right, rapture's happened. So you're in the tribulation. And who's going to be victorious in conquering stuff? Well, the Antichrist. So the first horse described in verse 2 is the Antichrist. It being sent out from heaven. Now, God's allowing the Antichrist. He's not commissioning him. He's not saying, hey, go down and tear stuff up and cause evil and havoc and stuff. That's not what God's doing here. But the devil has arranged for the Antichrist to come about, and the devil's the one sending the Antichrist out. Now, God allows it to happen because it's in the ultimate fulfillment of his prophecy and his promises. But that's what verse 2 is talking about. And so when you have the tribulation period, the Antichrist will come to power, and there will be this false peace for the first 3.5 years, and then there will be no peace for the last 3.5, right? Well, how is the Antichrist going to come to power? Well, initially, again, the rapture is going to happen, so all the whole Christian church is removed from the earth. All the godly influence is gone, so now evil gets to take over. Wherever there's a vacuum, something's got to fill it. And so, you and I, if we are Christians, we're not here when this happens. We're gone. We get called up with the church in the rapture. But in this case, the Antichrist is going to come in and assume power, and the governments are going to be able to all come together, one world government, one world religion, one world economy. And so, that's what you're going to see. Well, there's going to be a lot of violence. There's going to be people who don't want to be part of one world government, even though they weren't following Christ and they didn't get caught up in the rapture. You're going to have people that will come to Christ during that time. You will have people that will be resistant to any form of leadership. That's one of the things about people in sin is they have a hard time. You and I, everybody, whoever is dealing with sin has a very hard time dealing with authority of any kind. And whether it's your boss at work, whether it's your immediate supervisor, whether it's police officers, school teachers, anybody in a position of authority, regardless of who put them there, when we are not Christians, when we are not in the Spirit, when we are not studied up on the Word of God, we have a very difficult time responding to authority. So there's going to be a lot of battles and a lot of fights, and there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. Again, it's not going to be peaceful. The governments and the Antichrist are going to be standing on the news saying, oh, everything's peachy, everything's great, just do what we say to do. Put this chip in your hand or put this bandana on your forehead or whatever, which the mark of the beast is more than one thing, I believe. But, that's what's going to be happening, and there's going to be people resistant to that, and there will be fighting. So, which brings us to the next horse, the next verse, in verse 4. He talks about a red horse. Now, red is war or battle, violence, red blood. Because when you go back and actually look this up in the Greek, it's not the same. It's not the same word for sword is not used all the way throughout the whole entire Bible. It's not used all the way through the New Testament in Greek, and it's not the same word in Hebrew because there's different types of swords. And in this case, in the Greek, he's carrying a machaira. I'm probably not saying that correct. But that is not the same word used when he describes what Christ looks like on the horse with the flaming sword coming out of his mouth. The word in that situation is ramphia, or rampia, or Rhomphaia, right? Again, you look this up in Bible Hub, you can see this for yourself. But that word is actually a large sword that is used in battle. And it's something that you can cleave people with, you can swing, it's got weight to it, it's sharp, it's heavy. You do a lot of damage, right?
It's actually pronounced Rompia.
Romphaia?
Rompia.
Thank you. Okay.
The Romans, they carried that out into like the gladiators type thing. It actually went out and then went up as a 45-degree angle and rolled. It was intended on swinging and slicing at the same time. It was not a straight sword. It was actually at a 45-degree bend.
Cool. No, that's good knowledge. So, which ties in though, because the word. No, that's great. The word that is used for what the rider of the red horse is carrying is a completely different word, and Machaira. So I guess if the other word is Romphaia, this would be Machira. I don't know. Look it up. On Bible Hub, it's a great thing about Bible Hub is they got a thing where you can actually listen to the word. You can say the word for you so you can hear what it's supposed to sound like. But again, completely different word. So what the rider of the red horse is carrying is actually either a short sword, the Roman short sword, which wasn't more than about 3 foot long at the most, between 2 to 3 foot long, or it could also mean dagger. And what this entails is close to close, person to person, close quarter combat. This is not World War III. So the Red Horse is not ushering in World War III. Let's see here. Okay, Amir Tsarfati says this: he will bring division and subterfuge and civil unrest. The phrase "people should kill one another," that's in that verse, has a very personal one-on-one meaning to it. So peace will disappear, not just between nations, but within cities and neighborhoods and homes. So again, the restraining influence of the church, the morality is gone. And so people are going to be fighting each other. You watch any of these dystopian movies that are like in the future, some cataclysmic event removes the government, and what do you have? Matter of fact, you can go over to the Middle East and see this in certain places where the warlords are asserting their authority over certain regions of Iraq and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. And maybe not Saudi Arabia so much because their government is intact. But when you're talking about Palestine, when you're talking about Iraq, Iran, the ISIS people coming in trying to create the new caliphate, whatever, you have warlords and you have people, might makes right, so to speak, and whoever's got the biggest sword and can wield it wins. That's what you're going to see when the red horse is covering the earth, is when the red horse is attacking. I say attacking as they're riding across the earth, as they're being unleashed from heaven. So God is allowing these events to happen. All right, so like I said, the white horse comes in. That's the Antichrist. He takes power. While he's in charge, the red horse comes behind him, and everybody's fighting each other. There's no peace, right? No Jesus, no peace. Whether it's N-O or K-N-O-W, no Jesus, no peace, right? Let's see here. So verse 5, the third horse is the black horse, and he's carrying 2 scales. Now, the scales, in this case, they're scales, they're not of judgment as much as they are. Remember we said there's going to be a one world economy. And so what the black horse is going to do is going to destroy the economy. And it's going to bring All right, when you read into it talks about in verse 5, and you look at verse 6, and I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. So,
Denarius would be the same equivalent as today's dollar. I think.
it's a day's wage. Close.
Yeah.
It's a day's wage. So, whatever amount of money you make today, even with the inflation and the garbage we're dealing with right now from the current political administration, it's, you work 5 days, we go to the grocery store on the 5th day when our paycheck comes in, we pay all our bills, we can feed ourselves for 5 days. Well, a quart of wheat, and I have to look up exactly what that measurement is, but that's basically enough to feed one person. So you're going to have to work a whole day to feed one person. If you have a family at home, 3 to 5, 6 people, depending how big your family is, and back in these days they had 7 or 8 kids, usually, 1 day's wage to buy 1 quart of wheat is not going to feed that many mouths. So you're going to work, but you're not going to be able to feed your family. And if you think it's bad now, if you think the shortages are bad now in certain places around America right now, or even across the world, especially in your major metropolitan city centers, if you think it's bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet. All right? We have some spots around here. We're in central Alabama, so there are some places where there's empty shelves. I've seen shortages of things on shelves. A lot of that, again, has to do with government influence and regulation. But if you think that's bad now, imagine walking into Walmart and nothing is on the shelves. And what little is there, people are fighting over. All right, so that's what we're getting into. And you might say, well, then I'll get the 3 quarts of barley. Well, barley has far less nutritional value than wheat does. And a loaf of barley bread doesn't do as much for you as a loaf of wheat bread. There's far more nutritional value, even in today's GMO and heavily processed food world. A loaf of wheat bread is far more nutritious than barley. Okay? And even if you made the wheat into a bunch of little tortillas or something, that still has more nutritional value, but it still doesn't fill you up like other things would. So you're going to have a very tough time buying food. The world economies are going to be going down. Again, that's where the mark of the beast comes in. You're going to have the mark of the beast in order to get food by, because the governments are going to be controlling all the food. So as the black horse is riding through and the economies are being destroyed and there's nothing on the shelves, like I said, if you think this is bad now, you have seen nothing yet.
During World War II, they actually issued what was called family cards. My grandfather had one, and after he passed away, I found it in his dresser drawer. And it was kind of like a food stamp card we have now, but during the Depression, things were so rationed out that on this card you had 5 days a week, the date of the day, and on that day you would go, they would punch your card, they would give you, like say you had, your wife, your husband, your wife, your 2 kids, they would give you, say, $40 worth of food for that day. They punch your card, but that's all you got for that day. That was it. It may be beans, it may be bread, it may be rice. You never know what it's going to be. The government just give it to you. But that was it. And you literally lived day by day by day. And where my family comes from up in Arkansas, they didn't have that. We lived off the land, off of gardens, deers, squirrels, rabbits, fish, whatever we could get. say so, but we did what we had to do to feed our family. And my grandfather, from working in the coal mines, he actually had one of those carts from where his daddy would punch the cart and get 1 day's worth of food for the family to feed these kids. I thought that was kind of cool when I found that cart. I was like, dang, I'm glad we don't have that now.
Well, that's a great piece of history, but here's the thing: it's going to happen again.
Oh yeah,
Instead of a card, and I realize we're not at this point in Revelation yet. The mark of the beast is coming up, and I realize the Bible, everybody's Bible says 666, and that's not in some of the original scrolls when they went back to do retranslations. Everybody says their translation's the best. Well, there's flaws in all of them. Some scrolls had the number 666 in them, but a lot of them actually had what ended up something nobody could translate at the time it was written. So something was written 2,000 years ago in a language, in characters that nobody could translate until the last couple hundred years. And it actually it was seen several years ago during the Obama administration when ISIS came to power. Those 3 characters that were in some of those scrolls from 2,000 years ago were showing up on ISIS flags and bandanas. That's why I say that the mark of the beast isn't necessarily a microchip. And so here's the other side of that going back to the Cold War, when everybody, the proliferation of nuclear arms, and the major powers were the only ones that had them and were controlling them or doing a better job of controlling them, pretty much giving them away now. Because Iran has nuclear weapons, North Korea has nuclear weapons. But anyways, something that nobody ever talks about, especially because of the amount of embarrassment that would be there, is something the Russians and the U.S. did during the Cold War was to create suitcase bombs.
I've been in the military, never heard of those.
Low yield nuclear bombs that fit inside of a suitcase.
Really? Wow.
And a whole bunch of them are unaccounted for. Nobody's going to talk about that. It's top secret. Nobody's going to talk about it. And it's embarrassing, and B, it's a major threat to national security all over the place. Now, here's the thing. When the rapture happens, and when the Antichrist comes to power, and then you're going to have all these people out there fighting each other, the red horses running around, it's person to person. You have all these people, the terrorist cells that are all over the earth, the sleeper cells all over America and all over everywhere else are going to wake up, and some of them have these suitcase bombs. And all you got to do is get in an airplane at a couple hundred feet, 1,000 feet, whatever, blow it up in midair in your little jihadi war, and you've sent electromagnetic pulse that's going to shut down all the electronics in a given area. So you're going to have places.
You're talking about EMPs.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't heard of those. When you say EMPs, you said bomb.
Well, it's a nuclear bomb. That's how an EMP works. It's a nuclear fission reaction that sends out all these. I listened to a guy on some reel the other day who's a nuclear physicist talking about how an EMP works. And so what that's going to do is shut down all of the electronics. Your little microchip in your forehead or in your hand isn't going to work.
That's right.
And even if the microchip was okay, whatever receptacle that you would wave it in front of isn't going to work. So you're going to have, now is that going to be all over the world? No. It's going to be an isolated area. So some places the chips will work, some places they won't. And you're going to need these headbands and these bandanas. And, so it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Islam will be the one world religion, some form of it. But again, that's getting further down the road in Revelation. I'm just simply saying that the one world economy will be destroyed, and it will get to a point where the government will be the people with the power are going to be the only ones with the food, and you're only going to be allowed so much food, and you're barely going to work. You're going to work, and you're not going to be able to feed your family. All right, so you're going to have famine. You're going to have all this. You're going to have a lot of problems from that. It's the black horse in verse 5 there, which is going to bring about. You jump down to verse 8, and you now have the pale horse, which they call it death. The probably a better, again, over translating the word, because the word, death is not going to go out and cause death. Death is not a cloaked figure with a sickle and a skeleton. Death is not a person. It's something that happens at the end of life. But in this case, the pale horse, let's see, in verse 8 it says, its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. So, a better translation might be pestilence, but it's whatever it is. It's a spirit of death that is going to come across the world. And think about it. Amir points out that currently there's around 8 billion people on the earth. I mean, it's possible to be up to 10 by the time Christ returns, or by the time the rapture happens. It may happen sooner than that. But when you're talking about a potential from 2 to 3 billion people on earth dying at one time. And honestly, if we take a step back, probably 2 billion is a good estimate, because the church is gone. And so you have at least 1/10 to 1/4 of the population gone. The true church being called up is gone. So all the people left behind are going to have to struggle and figure out who they're going to follow, God or the Antichrist. But again, death is going to come through. The pale horse is going to come through. And with pestilence, with war, with famine, that's what it means here. So to kill with the sword is to die in battle. All right, so remember, the red horse is coming across the earth, and people are fighting each other. Close quarters, person to person, village to village, house to house in the suburbs, apartment building to apartment building if they're still standing in major metropolitan cities. And then you're going to have the famine. All right, remember, the black horse crashes the world's economy. And so people can't feed themselves. And when you have no food to nourish your body, what then happens? You are open to illness and disease and sickness. If you think COVID and monkeypox is scary now, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, that's just the God's honest truth. It's right here in Scripture. I don't think. I mean, this is just a glimpse, folks. I'm saying, and there's honestly the nitty gritty of it is when you really get down to it, there are currently worse diseases than COVID-19 in the world right now. Before they ever created it in a lab, which they did, before they ever created monkeypox. Monkeypox, folks, has been declared a World Health problem, and they're declaring it an emergency. It's a sexually transmitted disease, folks. It's a man-made, lab-created, sexually transmitted disease, and the government is trying to control you with it. I mean, all you got to do is not do certain types of fornication with certain types of people, and you don't get it. That simple. But if you think that this is fearful now, you ain't seen nothing yet, folks. I'm just telling you, what the government is doing right now is not on any kind of scale as to what God's going to allow to happen during the tribulation period. And so you're going to have death by sword, death by famine, which will bring about the pestilence, and then wild beasts. You're going to have all kinds of animals coming out of the woodwork. People are going to be running from the cities. People are going to be going into wild areas. And we're actually going to get into this in just a minute here, because there's a sequence to all of this. And so people are going to be running around. So wild beasts are going to be eating people. Wolves, hyenas, bears, tigers, lions. Down here in the South, we have mountain lions, we have lynx, we have bobcats, we got timber wolves, we got coyotes. There's going to be people dying all over the place, and there's going to be people too weak to fight off these animals because you don't have the societal protections that you had before all this junk started. So you're going to have animals eating people. There's places in Africa right now that have to set fires that will burn all night long to keep lions out of their homes. They have to plant cactuses as a fence around their homes because they don't have doors to keep wild creatures out of their homes at night that come in and eat them and kill them in their sleep. This actually happens in Africa. They've made movies about it, but it's a real life thing. Which, interestingly enough, you have all these bleeding hearts out there. You can't kill the animals. Well, the animals are killing the people, so what are you supposed to do, right?
Elephant stampedes, too. That's a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Zimbabwe, and he said that during the mating season of the elephants, they have to dig large trenches and put what's called contact sticks from the ground up. It's like big spikes.
Big sharp sticks, yeah.
It sounds really inhumane, but if they didn't do that just in their home boundary, that the elephant stampedes from the mating, they'll trample all over their homes, their gardens, and even people. Elephants are not like horses. They won't jump over you. They will just trample over you. They don't care. They'll knock you over and stomp on top of you. So they build large, big swimming pool size, sharp objects in the ground to where if the elephant falls in it,
they're dead, yeah.
And they don't have a choice, they have to, because they're overpopulated.
Like I said, you think you got problems now. Just wait. So then we go down to verse 9, and you have the fifth seal being opened, right? So that the seals are being opened. So the first four seals are the horsemen of the apocalypse. The fifth seal is, let me see here. I'll pull this up and read this straight out of, let's see here. All right, so verse 9, the fifth seal. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were given each a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. So, tribulation saints, people who, and there's a big debate about this. Well, first off, if you don't come to Christ, I don't care what Catholics or anybody else say, if you don't come to Christ and salvation through His grace and mercy before you die here on earth, it's too late. You go to hell. There is no praying you out of purgatory. There's no. If you die before you get saved, that's it. You're done. If you're still alive when the rapture happens and you're a true Christian in the true church and you get called up at the rapture, that's the second deadline, right? It's done. There's going to be a lot of people who claim to be a Christian. How many people cry, Lord, Lord, but don't get to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? There are going to be people who are going to realize that they screwed up by not accepting Christ to begin with. Now, there's a debate as to, do those people get saved? If you hear the gospel and the rapture happens and you hadn't accepted it, do you still have a chance of salvation? And from what Amir's saying here, you do. And that's one way you can interpret this when you read through this. But the problem is you're going to have to go through the tribulation. And there will be followers of God, because it specifically says that the Antichrist is out persecuting Christians. He's persecuting the followers of God while he is in charge. It isn't just that he's killing people just for the fun of it. He's killing people because they are his enemies. Why are they his enemies? Because they're not following the Antichrist, they're following God. So there will be followers and worshipers of God who will die during the tribulation. That's the fifth seal, the tribulation saints. They don't get to go to the place that Christ prepared for them. They have to wait, right? So they're waiting. They're tucked away neat and safe under the throne of God. They're given white robes, which means what? Which means purity, which means that they have died they're martyred for God because of the word of Christ and because of their witness to the word of Christ. They're killed by the Antichrist and his followers. So they're sitting there wanting to know, hey, when are we going to be avenged? And to which God says, hey, just rest a little longer. We have to get everybody. In other words, the tribulation has to be complete. And so all of your tribulation saints during that 7 years have to all be killed in order to complete the number. And all of those people are in heaven. They're all under the throne of God. Then, revenge is mine, so saith the Lord. And then God will avenge their blood that's been shed for him. So there will be people that will come to salvation during the tribulation period. But why would you want to wait?
That's very true.
Why would you want to go through all this crap? I mean, there are people who think that they have to go through the tribulation period in order to make penance for what they believe, or for their sins. And that's not what the Bible says. Christ says, hey, come to me. Bring your sin to me. Come and seek me out and call my name out, and I will heal you and I will forgive you. And and you do that now. You don't have to go through any of this stuff. You don't have to. You might be that stubborn in it. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what it takes. The problem that you have, though, is if you die before the tribulation, if you die before the rapture, you're screwed. Real plain and simple. If you wait until the rapture and the tribulation, you might die before it happens. And there's, like I said, purgatory is not a real place. It's imaginary. It's made up. The closest you get to that is Sheol. And if you go and study up on Sheol in the Old Testament, you find out that you have Abraham's bosom. You have the good side and you have the bad side. And there's a massive gulf in between them. And even Christ talks about this in the Gospels. You can't cross from one. He talks about Lazarus and the poor man. And Lazarus goes to the bad side of Sheol, and the poor man goes to the good side of Sheol. And Lazarus is pleading with God, let me go back and tell my brothers so they don't have to go through this. And so once you're on the bad side, you can't get out of it. So even if you end up in purgatory, you're not coming out of it. It's not a real place. It's hell. That when you go back to verse 8, when the pale horse rides through, its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. So you have death and hell riding on the same horse and collecting up 1/4 of the people on the earth. They're going to hell. There's no praying them out of it. They're going to die because they're fighting against God. And the contrast when you get into verse 9 with the tribulation saints who are safely under the throne of God, as opposed to the people that are being collected by death and hell and being taken to hell, and their souls are cast into the lake of fire, as opposed to the souls that are safely under the throne of God. So then the sixth seal, verse 12. Earthquakes, and there will be massive earthquakes, and the sun is going to be blacked out, and the moon becomes red. You get down to verse 13, stars fell to the earth. Verse 14, the sky vanishes and every mountain is removed. So verse 6, the sixth seal, verse 12, sorry. The sixth seal, massive calamities, physical calamities on earth. And, right now there's more earthquakes around the world today than there ever has been in history. There's websites, I had an app on my phone at one point that tracked every earthquake around the world. They have a massive data network where they're tracking all these things and they're collecting all this data. And now people will tell you, oh, no, that's a lie. That's a lie. No, it's an absolute truth. There are more earthquakes today than there have been in the history of the world. We're leading up, those are the birth pains leading up to, eventually leading up to the rapture and everything else. So we're getting closer to the end of days, right? But this is going to be an earthquake. And I'm not going to say to end all earthquakes, because there actually will be more earthquakes coming. There's at least 3 earthquakes that are mentioned in Revelation, and each one gets worse. This one takes down all the mountains. So you have all this cloud and ash and this dust and cloud in the sky. You get with these earthquakes, going to be volcanoes. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on. There'll be so much ash and dust, you're not going to be able to see the sun. The moon will become red. If you've ever been anywhere close to a volcanic eruption, or if you've been somewhere where there's a fire and there's a lot of smoke in the air, when the moon comes up, the moon is red. That's where everybody gets all upset about these blood moons that we've been having. And they happen periodically. It's a certain time of the year. The moon's a certain, close enough to the earth. And when it first rises up in the atmosphere, especially if you've been around a smoggy place. I used to live in San Diego. It was orange, almost red every day when the moon rose because of the smog, right? So imagine that on a massive scale with all this dust and crap in the sky, and the moon's trying to come through and all you see is a red moon. Even when it gets up to its peak, it's red. And so you're going to have all that. Verse 13, the stars fell to the earth. You'll no longer see stars in the sky. There's going to be meteor showers. There's going to be that kind of stuff. And what's interesting about this is, when you get down to verses 15 through 17, then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone slave and free hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Instead of turning back to God, instead of turning to God and seeking his forgiveness so he'll stop, people would rather be buried in a mountain than turn themselves to God. And when you stop to think about this, and this is not conspiratorial because it's an absolute truth, there are cities being constructed underground right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you look at Elon Musk, of all people, as much as I like the guy, has a company whose whole purpose is drilling tunnels underground. Why? Because he wants all the cars and stuff to go underground. Well, you imagine these long tunnels from point to point. When they opened a tunnel 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, over in Europe, there was this massive satanic worship service. This was broadcasted. You can find this on YouTube or whatever. You can find it on Rumble. And I forget exactly what they were dedicating. I want to say it was like a train tunnel thing. And they had this pagan ritual, all these dancers, these people doing weird gyrations and weird things, and looked like they were imitating sacrifice to dedicate a tunnel underground. It's really bizarre. Right now, the richest people in the world, major corporations, international conglomerates, and all these people, politicians, the powerful people in the world, are doing stuff underground that you have no idea is happening. We have mountains here in America where you truck driver drives in, watched a video the other day. Truck driver drives in, you've got 15, 20-foot ceilings. There's other trucks in there. If they had caught him filming this on his phone, they would have taken his phone and destroyed it. You drive in one side of the mountain and you drive out another side 100 miles from where you started. in some cases, 50 miles from where you started. This is not hyperbole. This isn't making anything up. This is not conspiracy. This is honest to God truth. I load trucks and I talk to truck drivers on a daily basis. There are places where they would take a load in and they drive in at one spot and there's nothing there. There's a hole in the ground. They drive in. When they come out on the other end of it, they have no idea where they are. GPS has to relocate them and then they move on to their next load. They're not allowed to get out of their trucks. They don't touch the freight, nothing. So you have, and you know, you want to go less conspiratorial than that. Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, home of NORAD. I don't know if NORAD's still, I think it's still there.
It's in Laughlin. That's in Laughlin.
So NORAD's been moved.
It's in Laughlin, Oklahoma right now.
Okay. But at one point, Cheyenne Mountain Complex, and they've done documentaries on this, they have earthquake-proof shelters inside of this mountain they've found. And only certain people were allowed to go in them, right? I mean, these people who follow Satan, who are following the evil one, are preparing for Armageddon, folks. They're preparing for the stuff in Revelation that God says you're not going to be able to run from. God can see you at the bottom of the ocean just like he can see you deep inside a Cheyenne Mountain. God can see you wherever you are. You can't escape God and his judgment. You can't escape his grace and his mercy either unless you choose not to accept it. But there are people out there who are following the evil one that think they're going to be able to survive all this. I'm all about prepping and having several days worth of food in your house because natural disasters can screw things up. And that roads can be blocked and power can go out and you might be stuck for days without electricity or water. So I'm all about being prepared for when those kind of things happen. But with the doomsday preppers who want to have the bunkers underground, that's not going to do you any good. The sanctuary. But CERN, that's the big, everybody's talking about CERN, CERN. It's the big atom collider, super collider thing over in Europe, and they have been doing tests. They've been trying to recreate a sun. They've been trying to recreate the universe, really, is what they've been trying to do. But they're trying to create a sun. Now, China claims that they've created a sun in their bunker underground over in China. But the conspiracy people, and I think there is some amount of imagination in some of this stuff, but I've heard chatter and people talking about how they're trying to create a portal to another dimension. Well, okay. Hey, we're back on Facebook. If I say the word CERN again, is it going to cut out again? It might. I don't know. But I watched the video, and there was a guy filming above ground, and there was this massive electromagnetic disturbance. There was purple lights. There was all this weirdness going on while they were running the super collider at CERN. My personal theory on the matter is that Satan has his followers trying to open up access to hell and to places where the demons can come from that are chained up in the pit. That could just be sci-fi. It could be imagination working overtime. I don't know what these knuckleheads at CERN are doing. It's not anything godly. I know that much. But yeah, so on that note, we're going to go ahead and shut this down for today. Head on into the sanctuary. So, swap on over to Lowrytown Baptist